Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Minnesota Bound podcast, the stories behind the stories. I'm Laura Schara, your host for today, and I'm really excited about our next guest on the Minnesota Bound podcast. We're going to be talking about your canine hunting companions and what to do to get them ready for fall hunting season because it's right around the corner. Before I introduce him, I want to give a thanks to our newest sponsor, North Dakota Tourism. Okay, it's time to introduce our next guest on the podcast today, and Tom Dokken is joining me this afternoon to chat about dog training and getting your dog ready for fall hunting season. And Tom, welcome to Minnesota Bound Podcast.
Hey, Laura, thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you for joining us. I have to say it's really special to have you on. Obviously, Tom has been a close friend of the Schara family for many years and has trained all of the ravens that were part of our family. And he owns Tom Dokken's Oak Ridge Kennels. But Tom, I read a quote about you, which I thought was fabulous, from Sport Dog, which you are a senior pro staffer at. It said, Tom Dokken has forgotten more about dog training than most of us will ever know. And that's pretty much true.
It's probably because of age more than anything else.
Well, you definitely at the top of your game for sure and know a lot about dog training and not only for retriever training, but, obedience training, all of the above. You do all of that. And but we want to focus today on really making sure people are doing the right things to get their dogs ready for fall hunting season. Of course, there's a long break in between fall and, then summer starts around. So, what would you say are some, basics when it comes to, getting an adult dog ready for fall hunting season?
Well, I think the biggest thing on the adult dogs is two things. Review what the end of the last season was like, any things that obedience-wise or control-wise out in the field, whether it was in the field or the duck blind, some of the things that you saw that I need to tighten those things up, because how they ended up last year is what you're going to end up on opening day if you don't address them. So if it's control, which most of the time on a retriever, it's going to be control, just the basics, to be honest with you. Coming, sitting, staying, laying down, heeling. Those are things that you can do in the backyard. Heck, you can do them down in the basement. Get the leash back on, even these older adult dogs. Get them back into a routine of saying, okay, we're going to go through these basics. I know we've done this years ago, but nothing like, getting back into it. You look at the professional sports athletes. Why do they have preseason? Why do they have, the mini camps and so on and so forth? They have to get back to the basics. And, it's really the same thing with these hunting dogs. And it puts you in a position where you now are getting a little bit more hands-on as well. And then control is going to be, one of the things that we talked about, but then also you got to get them in shape. A lot of times, we get like 2 weeks out from the hunting season and everybody decides, oh boy, I better get the training dummies out or I better start working my dog. Well, it takes longer than that to get them in shape. So right now, this time of year, on these retrievers, get them out early part of the day when it's coolest. Get them out and run them during the afternoon. If you say, well, it's too hot, I can't get them out, I can't do anything with them. Sure, you can. Find yourself a body of water. Go out and get that swimming exercise in with them, because it's probably better cardio than anything else anyways. And then evening time, it's going to cool down a little bit in the evenings. Get out, get them back on a regimen of going for a run. And then one other thing I want to bring up, if you take your dog for a walk, that's really not enough exercise for a working dog. I mean, if you're walking, it's almost like a crawl for them. So get them out, get them to the park, get them to a soccer field, something like that if you're living in town. But they do have to run in order to get in shape.
Very much so. And do you think people kind of in general just have the expectation that their dog will remember everything that they had learned when they were, maybe a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and that they don't necessarily put the time in and kind of that repetition of making sure that they're brushing up on all the basic skills and commands that the dogs need to have to be successful?
Yeah, and I think how good the foundation was. You got to go, how good was the foundation to begin with when they were a year or 2 years old? I mean, were they extremely sharp on everything back then, or did you just rough them into some basic control or basic skills? So then you need to start thinking about, what are my expectations going to be coming into the hunting season? So I don't care, how old they are. My own personal dogs as well. I have to tune them back up, just like anybody else does. For me, tuning them up isn't necessarily I'm out in the backyard or I'm out in the field working them. Just basic control starts in the house. I'd say 98% of our customers, their dogs live indoors. I know mine do. And, little things like, hey, when we go to the door, you have to sit and wait before you go out. When we come back in, you have to sit and wait before, you can come back in. Coming when called, all of those little things. I mean, if you can't do those things in that situation, forget about doing it out in the field, because there's going to be way more distraction out there than there is going to be around your household.
That is such a great point of, if having your dog really, I guess, respect you as a leader, a pack leader per se, in the house is probably the most important thing to having that translate out into the field. And I bet a lot of people don't really think about that, because you can get lax in the house, right? They're, getting snacks and treats, and you're like, oh, it's fine. He just, ran past my knees, running out the door in front of me and things like that, where that translates significantly out in the field.
Right. And these hunting dogs, back when I started, basically almost 50 years ago now, the hunting dog basically lived out in the backyard, most likely in a kennel. And it was dad's dog. Nobody really, other than, maybe one other family member at most, spent any time with it. But now, you think about it, if you are living with that dog, they're actually watching your habits 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And to really, if you're not consistent and just follow guidelines, it's like, no, we're going to do this every time. It's easy to just get lax on a lot of things. So I know in our house, Tina and I, we just got basic rules. Yeah, you can hang around us and do these things, but when we say you have to do this, it's not going to be 5 or 6 times. It's going to be you say it once, and then depending on the dog, whatever corrections necessary, if you have to say it again, it comes. And that's the only way you're going to get them consistent. Yeah, but remember, you're under the microscope if you have a dog that lives with you 24 hours a day, and they're watching for the little things that you are going to let them get away with. So, and that'll tend to snowball on you after a while.
Isn't that the truth? Especially with retrievers, I feel like they're always trying to test the limits somehow. They're always willing to say, well, what can I get away with today?
Well, they're dogs that want to work. So they're not used to a real sedentary lifestyle. So in a lot of cases, especially if you have a youngster in the house, a young pup, they're going to be getting into trouble constantly, because, they're probably not getting enough exercise and they're not getting enough to fulfill, their need to work. So, especially if you have a younger dog, you need to get them out and get them some work, because that's what they're used to. And that really goes for all sporting dogs, or in most cases, even somebody who has a pet. The younger they are, the more likely they are, they got to burn off some energy. If not, they're going to be getting into trouble in the house.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue into our next question of really talking about young dogs and those who, may have brought home a puppy this past spring, and this is their first season this fall, kind of introducing them to hunting and retrieving. And before we get to that, I want to first thank North Dakota Tourism.
Start planning your fall hunt in North Dakota at legendarynd.com. North Dakota is home to more than 800,000 plots, hunting acres. Those acres are private land that is open to public hunting, and the plots map guides show you exactly where all that land sits. North Dakota's ringneck pheasant crowing counts are up 15% this year, and of course that takes good habitat. The state is also home to an estimated 2.9 million breeding ducks. North Dakota, it's an absolute outdoor oasis just waiting. Bag your limit this fall in North Dakota. Visit legendarynd.com.
Do you really know what it costs to heat your water at your home, cabin, or business? No? Well, guess what? We do. Based on data from the U.S. Department of Energy, the average annual saving for homes that heat their water with propane rather than electricity is $175. You can save energy and get 2.5 times as much hot water compared to the average electric water heater. So let's save energy and money with a cleaner, greener fuel. Propane, the right energy right now. Also, thanks to Voyager Saunas.
Hey there. Bill Shirk, the man about the woods. You know what? It's time to relax, and Voyager can help. Voyager builds custom saunas for your home, backyard, business, and you know what? The pick of the Shirk family, we love Voyager's mobile saunas that go anywhere we want to go. Clear grade cedar benches, spray foam insulation, Kuma wood-fired stoves, or Hilo electric heaters. These are Finnish-influenced hand-built saunas that will last a lifetime. They're constructed with care by the hometown Voyagers team. You know, the Shirk family loves our Voyager mobile sauna. Voyager, a Minnesota movement influenced by Finnish culture. Visit VoyagerSaunas.com and get ready to distress. Trust me, it works.
All right, Tom, back to chatting about young gun dogs. And I would love it if you kind of gave our listeners some information and tips and tricks on what to do to get them ready for fall season, but also what not to do since they're still young at age.
Well, I think the biggest thing going into the hunting season for, most people get a puppy in the spring or early winter. Two things that you cannot have happen, especially with a retriever or a hunting dog in general. Two things that can't go wrong. You can't have one that is gun shy, and you can't have one that is afraid of birds. Those two things are fairly obvious. If you have a dog that's gun shy, in a lot of cases, even a professional dog trainer can't get them over that once they are gun shy. And so now you've relegated yourself to a pet where you started off wanting a hunting dog. So that's very important. One other thing is water introduction for these young retrievers. And most people think that, well, I have a retriever. It says retriever, Labrador retriever. So I should be able to just expect him to go out and swim. That just doesn't happen, right off the bat. Sure. So water introduction is important, how you do it. Some things that you do not want to do. And I think dog training has a lot to do with what you shouldn't do as much as it has to do with what you should do. So a couple of things here. You never want your puppy, especially if they haven't had any introduction to the water, you never want them to fall off of a dock. You don't want them to fall out of a boat, and you don't want to pick them up and physically put them in the water over their head. And I'll explain that, because these introductions, that's no different than a dog getting gun shy, where somebody bangs a 12 gauge right over the top of the puppy and goes, oh, looks like he's afraid of the gun. They never had a chance. So the same way with a water introduction is, if that puppy falls off the dock, well, is he going to drown? No, he's going to get into shore, but he had a near death experience in a lot of cases in his own mind. Same way with falling out of a boat, before he knows how to swim. And the same way would be just picking them up and putting them in over their head. And these are things, if you were going to introduce a child to the water, and want them to be really, a water fanatic, you wouldn't want that to happen to them as well. So you can't have it happen to your puppy. And I don't care how great your puppy is, how good of breeding, all of these things are. If they have one of these bad experiences, there are chances that they can't overcome them. So it's extremely important. We just came out of the 4th of July, and that means fireworks. Mm-hmm. And I don't know how many phone calls we're going to get here coming up on people who are concerned about their puppies, but it is an issue. So bird and gun introduction is amazingly, the biggest things that you have to be concerned with. And go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was like, do you suggest leaving, the gun introduction and the water introduction to a professional trainer? How would one go about really doing it the right way?
I think the water introduction could be done, and I'll explain it so people kind of understand it. What I would do is, if I had a young puppy, I'd find myself a little pond that has a nice hard bottom on it. And then what I would do on one of these hot days like we've had, I'd take that puppy for a short walk where they get kind of warm, and then we're going to end up right where that water is. And I would have my hip boots on, or if you got your shorts on, just go ahead and just walk in the water. Now that puppy, because they should be bonded to you, most likely is going to follow you in a little bit. They'll all go in at their own pace. So maybe the first time you do this, they only, maybe go in, up to their belly, and don't swim, don't panic, don't worry that it won't happen. You want to do this on a daily basis till the point where you can wade out in the water and your puppy is going to follow you. Now, if you have an adult dog that your puppy is bonded with pretty well and has a lot of confidence, you could bring your older dog with you on these walks and do the same thing when you go in the water. If your other dog is a really good water dog, most likely they're going to follow you. If you think about it, if they were wild canines, and mom, said, well, we got to cross this little creek here because we got to go to the other side. They're going to follow. So that introduction, I think most people could make that. The biggest thing is avoiding the mistakes that I had mentioned. Now, gun introduction, if you have a dog that's gun shy, that is not hereditary. Hereditary meaning that, well, the parents were gun shy, so my puppy's going to be gun shy. It's a man-made problem. So they had a bad experience with a noise. It doesn't have to be a gun. It could be anything from, like I just said, it could be fireworks. It could be a car backfiring. It could be somebody's working inside your house on a remodel and they got the nail gun going. These are sharp noises, and there's nothing positive to relate to. So it takes us 2 weeks professionally to introduce a puppy properly to the gun. Wow. It takes us 2 weeks. So, if you go out and go, well, I got this weekend, I just got to go out and shoot the gun and see if it tolerates it. You're really rolling the dice. We do a positive gun introduction. So I'll explain it. What we do is first get these puppies really introduced and excited about a bird, and get them, those instincts going where they go, man, I gotta go pick that up. And we'd start maybe with a frozen pigeon, get them out, grabbing that, really making it exciting for them. Then we'd have one of our assistants go out in front. One person would be holding on to the young pup. About 5 months old is when we start this, so people would know. And then he would actually have the pigeon in his hands. We'd have the young pup on a check cord. For people who don't know what that is, it'd be about a 50-foot cord. He would clap his hands and then throw the pigeon for the puppy to retrieve at about 20, 30 yards. Well, clapping your hands is not loud enough to cause any kind of problem. But what's happening is we're getting a little audible with something that the puppy wants. So that's kind of the start. So now pretty soon they start figuring out that person out in front there, every day I go out there, he's got something I want. I hear that little noise, and I get to go get what I want. So that's the beginning stages. Then we would go to a 22 blank pistol. Now we're out at a distance, remember. A little pop with that, throw the bird, let him make that retrieve. Each day, based on if we're watching that puppy and they're very excited to want to keep doing this, we'd work our way in a little closer, a little closer, a little closer. So at a period of time, we'll get to the point where we're actually shooting right next to the puppy while we're throwing that bird. But then we'd have to go all the way back out with this process and start with the 410.
Oh, sure.
Same process, working our way gradually in. Then once we're to that point, we go with 20 gauge, work our way in. And we're doing this thing all the way up to the 12 gauge. Now, keep in mind, if we're watching this puppy, if we see, even if he blinks when that blank gun or any of those guns go off, if he blinks but still goes and makes the retrieve, we're going to stop where we're at, and we're going to go back down to a lighter gauge or a 22, because that blinking would be step one of going, I'm a little unsure of this right now.
Sure.
And if you just keep forcing it down their throat, that's when you're going to have a problem. So we call that a positive reinforcement gun introduction. They want to hear the noise. They want to hear it. Now, a tolerance introduction would be go to the gun club, stand in the parking lot while they're shooting trap, and see if the puppy is tolerating the noise. And then gradually, you'd work your way up. That's not something I like. Yeah, could it work? Sure, but I consider that more of a gamble,
Yeah.
and I can't gamble with that. I just can't gamble with that dog's future. So people need to really be super careful with that. It's something so important. Once we get done with 2 weeks of introducing somebody's young dog to birds and gun, and that association's there, we can say you have a hunting dog now. You have a hunting dog. Now, do you have a trained dog? No, but we know you have a hunting dog.
Yep. And, it's interesting you say how delicate the process is. I would guess that the general public would never estimate that it would take 2 full weeks to really do it the right way and make sure that you do have a hunting dog. Because if you think about how much time and effort and money you spend to buy a puppy with the hopes they're going to be your hunting companion for years to come, and to have a one-time moment really ruin it is very risky. So it's all very good advice.
Yeah, and it doesn't make any difference, if you spent a fortune on the best bloodlines you can, because it has nothing to do with natural ability. It has everything to do with improper introduction. And there'll be people go that I just took my last dog out and just shot the gun and he was fine. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to take that chance though.
Sure. And, we just had 4th of July here, obviously. And that is a moment of what do you do when you have a puppy? And I've been in that situation as well to, kind of, I guess, help them through that situation or monitor, or do you have just general tips for even, home companions and dogs on how to, I guess, get a dog through the 4th of July if they do have intimidation by it? Or do you try to put them in the quietest room possible, especially with a puppy that you just purchased and they haven't been introduced to gunshots yet? That could possibly ruin a situation too. So do you have advice for people at home just during the 4th of July?
Yeah, it's one of those things where knowing your environment a little bit too, going, okay, do we have neighbors that are probably going to be putting off fireworks? You can't always know that. All of a sudden it's like, oh, I had no idea. I just had the puppy out in the backyard and now they shot off, all these fireworks and you've got a problem. What I'd want to do would be have that puppy, keep him in the house, and then know your surroundings, get him outside. Because, this isn't something you have to be, afraid of for weeks on end. But then have the radio on, have some noise, but not loud bang, but have some noise on, have something that is going to be, kind of muffling anything that might be outside. I know if we're training and we have several dogs out, and we maybe have some younger dogs out that are just getting introduced to the gun, and they're watching us work with another dog, watching, and hearing the gun and watching these things in that bird and gun program. If we have like all of a sudden a thunderstorm, pull in right on top of us, one person is just quickly getting the puppies back up into the building, the puppy's saying 5 months old, and the other person is down there making all kinds of noise and fun and, hey, look what we're doing, and just keeping them tuned into something else other than what the noise is. So it's kind of tragic when you see that somebody could have just really had just a terrific dog and then end up with that problem. So you have to be aware of your surroundings. But the best thing is know your surroundings, and then also have them indoors, protect them from it, but have some noise going on. TV, maybe a little bit louder music, something that might drown out some of that. And we get people that go, I took my dog to the fireworks. Whew. No, not going to do it.
Yep. Probably not the best idea if they're not used to those loud boom. Sure. Well, I've got a couple more questions for you, Tom, but before we get there, did you know that Minnesota's wildlife management areas are a vast array of lands across all of Minnesota? These 1,440 WMAS, that's wildlife management areas, are valued for wildlife and Minnesotans' outdoor recreation opportunities. Annually, the DNR maintains hunter walking trails, plants food plots for wildlife, and develops acres and acres of prairie and grasslands. To find out more about Minnesota's wildlife management area, go to www.mndnr.gov/WMAS.
And who could forget Connecticut? The Shirks, we love our Connecticut water system. No secret there. We live out in the country. We've got that ironclad well water, which is good news and bad, right? Well, we treat all of our water with a Connecticut whole home water treatment system. We also use Connecticut's K5 drinking water system. You know that white buildup you get around your faucets? We've got none of that in the showers or in the kitchen. Our dishes are spotless. And of course, Katie loves what Connecticut water does for her hair and our skin. And like I like to say, the boys, before they leave for soccer practices or for the hockey rink, they always fill their water bottles with Connecticut water. What more can you say? Call Connecticut, do like the Shirks did, and look forward to clean, safe water.
Well, Tom, it's rather interesting. I'm dog sitting my sister's half Yorkie, half Maltese. And Bacon, my French bulldog, is trying to get her to wrestle. And she is not having any of it. So it's almost embarrassing when you're talking to one of the country's greatest dog trainers. And I have two misbehaved canines sitting right next to me.
Well, like I said, like when I was talking earlier, that's job security for us. If they're not behaving, that just keeps us in business.
I'm about to ship both of them down to you this afternoon if you're not going to listen. Joys of doing live podcasts. All right. So my last couple questions for you, are there specific drills that you suggest, for adult dogs that are trained just to get them sharpened back up? Do you do a lot of blind retrieves? Are you doing, are there specific drills that you really like, kind of your go-tos to just get back and ready for fall season?
Sure. Duck hunting. So there's different things that you're hunting for, but for duck dogs, the biggest mistake that they make or things that people don't touch on is a dog that sits in the duck blind. But when you start to shoot, that they just take off and they break. And, some people go, that's okay. I don't mind it if I shoot and the dog goes to make the retrieve. But what happens is they start anticipating not only that you shoot and then I break and go, but then they'll start anticipating as they're watching birds come in. They'll go, I think you should shoot right about now. And then they jump out of the blind. And then that just goes from there going like, well, I anticipate that you're going to shoot, here in a couple, about 15 seconds. So I'm going to jump out and get in the water to get a head start. And then it just snowballs on you. So a little drill you can do in the backyard to get started. If you have a dog that likes to retrieve, get yourself about a half a dozen training dummies. Have your dog sit down, provided that they know that they're supposed to sit and stay. And then throw a dummy out, and then throw another one, and then throw all 6 of them out, and then make your dog sit there and then walk out and pick them up yourself. And then a lot of people go, hey, I hired the dog to go do that. What am I? I'm going out and picking up the dummies. But what happens is your habits are throw the dummy, send the dog. Throw the dummy, send the dog. So they're anticipating that. And dogs that like to work, they are going to anticipate it. And then also you'll see them start to relax because they think, well, I don't get to go when I see the first one fall. And then periodically, you're going to be able to send your dog to make the retrieve. But also have them sit there when you throw a dummy, have them sit there and sit there for a minute or 2 minutes. A lot of times when we're duck hunting on my own personal dogs, if the wind isn't blowing super hard and we knock a duck down, well, we'll just sit there. I know that the duck's not going to drift off and take off. We might sit there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
Smart.
And then send the dog for the retrieve. So all of this really, Laura, is based on what habits have you let the dog get into? It's the biggest thing because these things they're more of a reflection of us than anything else. Now for upland hunting, it's going to be, especially a retriever, if they're flushing birds out there 150, 200 yards, you're going to lose a lot of friends pretty quick.
Yep.
So you're going to want to make sure that they understand coming when called is going to be the biggest thing. So if you have a dog that'll always come when you call them, you're in good shape. If you have a dog that you cannot get them to come when called, or I say quartering meaning come back, check in with me.
Yep.
Nowadays, though, with the equipment that we have, remote training collars nowadays, there's no excuse really for anybody having a dog that's totally out of control. The technology is so good. A lot of people maybe that don't know about remote collars or have a preconceived notion is you can set those things down so light that it's less than if you were just pulling on a leash. So I always say no excuses. No excuses for a dog that just goes out and hunts for itself. And then, other than that, for an upland dog, if they'll stay in close, stay in tight, so you can actually shoot a bird, that's the name of that game. How far out should they be? It depends on, how good a shot you are. But if your dog hunts, probably 20 yards out in front of you, if it goes straight away, the bird goes straight away, by the time you get up and pull your gun up and shoot, probably another 10 to 15 yards. So that's a 30 to 35 yard shot.
Yeah.
So, that might be a lot closer than what, you originally thought your dog should hunt. So those are two different things. Waterfowl dogs, you mentioned blind retrieves too. If you have a dog that will do advanced work, which blind retrieves and hand signals for a retriever, is that it? That's something that you have to be working on and setting up your whole line of drills to maintain that, because doing hand signals and blind retrieves for a dog is not natural. It's something that they have to be manually, working on throughout the year. And I know I'm doing that right now with several dogs, going through all of those basics, reviewing all of those things. So yeah, it's one of those things that you decide, what am I going to be hunting? And it might be during the hunting season going, I hunted ducks last weekend, I'm getting ready to go hunt pheasants. Just start tuning up on what you're going to come in contact with before you go.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I want to thank you for joining the Minnesota Bound podcast today. You are a wealth of information. And if people want to, find you and reach out to you for dog training advice, or if they want to, obviously hire you to send their dog to your school, if you will, where can they find you?
Well, Dokken's Oak Ridge Kennels, Facebook page, or, you can go to DokkensOakRidgeKennels.com. That'll get you in contact with us. And yeah, we're getting close to the hunting season here. So hard to believe, we just got done with the 4th of July, and a lot of the dogs that are going to come in for training here shortly, by the time we would finish them up, it's going to be right up against the hunting season. So yeah, I want to thank you for having me on, and say hi to your folks for me if you will.
I will. And I also have to say, I look forward to seeing you and Tina at Game Fair coming up. If you want to hear Tom Dokken speak, and he'll also be there to answer lots of questions. Game Fair's coming up August 13, 14, 15, I think 20, 21, and 22. And you'll be there both weekends, so they can chat with you there as well.
You bet. We'll have a booth, and then we'll be doing seminars down at the lake on a daily basis.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it. And also thank you to our sponsors, Voyager Saunas, Connecticut, Minnesota DNR, Minnesota Propane, and North Dakota Tourism. And last but not least, don't forget to introduce a kid to the great outdoors.